All right, I'm just going to ask Carolyn to come up and sit here, and if you could bring Rose up on the screen, that would be wonderful. Here, I will have you sit here so I can look at both you and Rose.
Middle, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I also, oh good, we got 45 minutes. I left my watch plugged into the grid, so I need. We had a member meeting this morning. We asked our members what issues Gridwise Alliance should tackle next year, and the first thing that came up was workforce. We talked about aging workforce. We talked about the growing need for workers in this industry and the need to be able to recruit them. We talked about a changing skill set, and it is certainly something that we're going to tackle with vigor next year. So this was coincidentally already planned before that issue came up. The other thing that we started yesterday morning with a women-only panel, and that was not by intention. We were going to have a diverse panel, but one of our panelists had to back out at the last minute, so it turned out to be a women-only panel. And last night, at least 4 women who were in the audience came up to me and told me that they noticed that we started with a women-only panel. And here we are finishing with a women-only panel. This was by intention. And the reason is that we have 2 amazing women with us who are 2 of 5 authors who wrote a book called The Energy Within Us, who talked about their really groundbreaking moves up through the energy industry to become leaders among us. And I think that when we think about what we want the workforce of the grid of the future to look like, it has to be a more diverse workforce, both in terms of people of color, women, and people with a diversity of viewpoints. And so we thought that we would have end this conference with a discussion about the future of the grid and the people, which is part of that, grid architecture. So let me introduce first Carolyn Green. Carolyn is founder and managing partner of Green Capital Management. She and I'm at the age where I need reading glasses. She serves as CEO and board chair of one of the holdings, Professional Environmental Engineers, and Casa Verde Energy Services, which provides energy assessment and efficiency programs. Prior to Green, she was the vice president at Sunoco. She's got 35 years of environment and energy experience. She was at Southern Gas Company, Ultramar Diamond Shamrock, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and president of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power Board of Commissioners. And then we have joining us remotely from Las Vegas, Rose McKinney-James. She's the former president and CEO for the Corporation of Solar Technology and Renewable Resources, a former commissioner of the Nevada Public Service Commission. She also served as Nevada's first director of the Department of Business and Industry. And I, having spent a lot of time in Nevada, can tell you that it's no exaggeration that Rose has shaped every aspect of energy policy in Nevada, including driving the development of solar in that solar state. She's 2 decades of service as a public company director. Since 2005, she's been a member of the board of directors of MGM Resorts. She serves on the board of NACD Pacific Southwest, Toyota Financial Savings Bank. She was the chair emerita. She is the chair emerita of the American Association of Blacks in Energy. And she's also listed in the Black Enterprise Registry of Black corporate directors among the 300 most influential African-American corporate directors in the United States. So we are joined by some real powerhouses and trailblazers in the industry. So I want to start by asking you why you wrote the book. What was driving the need to tell your stories?
Rose, you want to go first or me?
They've done this before, by the way.
We have done this before. Well, first off, I'm really delighted to be with you. And I'm actually not in Nevada. I'm in neighboring California en route to the East Coast. I was actually recruited to be a part of this conversation. When you look at the fabulous women who are authors, many of them have really distinguished careers in the energy industry, in corporate, in leadership positions. And I think the uniqueness of my work over the years focused on renewables and advancing solar, and the sisterhood that grew from our affiliation with the American Association of Blacks in Energy, or ABE, is probably the foundation, but principally because one of our authors, Hilda Penix Ragland, felt that we had a story and a narrative that needed to be shared. So, I was sort of a reluctant member of this team, but I found that it was really cathartic to spend the time that we did, each of us undertaking a chapter to reflect on where we'd been, where we came from, uh, some of the unique aspects of being a part of the energy industry. And for me in particular, the unique aspect of being a Black woman involved in advancing and advocating for solar in particular, but renewable energy uh, over many years. So, Carolyn, maybe you want to offer some perspective as well.
And certainly our common theme will be Hilda Penix-Ragland. Hilda and I met probably in 1985 when we were both newbies in the energy industry, and we met at an ABE, American Association of Blacks in Energy, national conference. Found out we had a lot of things in common, but as we were progressing in our careers, to no one's surprise, we were the only woman or the only person of color, certainly the only woman of color in the room. And there was nobody really to tell us the rules of engagement. And in talking about writing the book, we wanted to make sure that the next generation doesn't have that same problem, that there's somebody who can whisper in their ear and say, well, maybe you don't want to do it that way. Maybe you want to try this way or another way. So it really is a way of transmitting information to the next generation. Our culture is a spoken word culture, but in a world that's changing so rapidly, if it's not written down, it is in danger of being lost. So we decided to write it down.
Well, I started reading it on the train coming down here, and I thought, well, I'll just read Rose's chapter and Carolyn's chapter, but I read the whole book from the very beginning to the end. Just so you know, if you buy the book, all the proceeds go to a scholarship. You want to talk about the scholarship?
Sure. We decided that in addition to contributing our experiences, this would be a legacy for other young African-American women going into a STEM field. So all of the proceeds from the book go to the ABE Scholarship Fund to underwrite scholarships for Black women majoring in a STEM field.
So all five of you have very different but extremely successful careers, and you so share a lot of commonalities. You talked about family, you talked about some other influences, but you also shared some common challenges, and I will say that you downplayed those challenges in the book, but I think they were real. And can you talk about some of those challenges you encountered? And the reason for doing that is I think it will provide some insights for companies that are interested in smoothing the path to the C-suite for women of color.
Well, first off, the perception that Black women are, there's the stereotypical angry Black women. Well, we're not all angry. In fact, most of us are not angry. We do have preparation. Of the five of us, we have advanced degrees, we have law degrees, we are CPAs, we do all sorts of things. And then there's me, who's the musician and urban planner. But, we bring a lot of things to the table. And what we are asking is that people look at our skill sets, not necessarily our titles. When you're looking for talent, you really are looking for people who have had experiences doing certain things. And it may or may not be in the energy industry or in the specific niche of the energy industry that you're looking for. It could be in some other places. And as we move the industry forward, we need those other experiences, those experiences outside, let's say, the utility industry or the water industry or the oil and gas industry. We need some other perspectives to help us think more broadly. And that's one of the things we bring to the table.
Rose, see you nodding your head.
Look, yeah, I'm nodding my head because I agree completely. And I also think it's important as we focus on workforce as a topic to acknowledge that in many instances, as students are trying to figure out where they want to go, they are challenged with the lack of exposure to this broader range of opportunities within the field. And I think the industry is obligated to help in that way by opening their doors and their facilities and their resources to supporting from internships and other opportunities this exposure that I think is so important. You know, when I became a utility commissioner, to be quite candid, I really wasn't sure what I was taking on. And over the course of the 5 years that I served as a utility commissioner, I recognized the wide variety of skills and both academic and professional requirements that go into just that single aspect of the energy industry. So it is, in my view, so important to create that nexus and to offer that exposure and to be sensitive to the fact that every person brings a different perspective, a different narrative, a different background to the equation. And now that we are attempting to sort of expand our reach, it becomes critically important to make sure that we are connected to the communities where we conduct business. And that linkage can be achieved by ensuring the notion of an inclusive workforce, a diverse workforce, and one that's focused on equity.
Of the kind of different experiences. When I went to Southern California Gas Company, one of my first meetings was in a group of senior executives, and they were talking about, and this will date me, they were talking about retail wheeling. And they were trying to figure out how to kill it yet again. Naive me pops up and said, "Excuse me, do you think this will happen eventually?" And the response was yes. I said, then why are we not trying to figure out how we get in front of it and lead the charge rather than trying to kill it? There was dead silence in the room. And then people went on as if I never said a word. At the end of the meeting, the other Black person in the room came up to me and said, "Nice to meet you. I've heard good things about you. Welcome to the company. That was a good question. Don't ever ask it again." I asked him, why not? He said, "The people in this room made their careers 10 years ago by killing retail wheeling." I said, but it's 10 years later. We need to think differently. That question, within a month of my joining the company, got me labeled as a maverick. And later on, when the corporate psychologist was retiring, someone asked, "What do you think was your greatest accomplishment?" He said, "Well, I was hired to weed out the corporate sociopaths. And in general, I think I've done that, but I'm not sure that the company has been well served by that." And he looked at me and said, "You were one of them, but you came in at the level just below where I would have had to talk to you." That's incredible. I had come from the home building industry, which is very, very entrepreneurial, very fast moving. You have to make decisions immediately. You have to stay in front of the trends, et cetera. And then I come into an industry that I didn't realize was not the private sector, at least not the way I had known it. The company has evolved over the last 20, 30 years, but it needs people like me who are thinking entrepreneurially, who are thinking outside the box. And you're not necessarily going to find them by looking the same places you've looked all the time for belt and suspenders engineers or economists.
And Rose, you had a very similar experience when you started thinking about the role of solar in Nevada. And you did not come from the energy industry when you started working on solar. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the kind of similar experience that you had kind of being the disruptor.
Well, I wish I'd known that was going to be sort of a title at the time. But I really was just curious. I couldn't understand why in a state where we had such a significant resource, we were not entertaining more robust opportunities to leverage it. So my background actually is in community economic development. After law school and a stint on the Hill and working for an NGO that was sort of focused on community economic development, that's really what brought me to Nevada. I did not have a background in energy, and as I said, that appointment to the Utility Commission was really an eye-opening experience. Thank goodness, I joined a group of professionals that appreciated an outside perspective. But I did on occasion have the same experience that Carolyn describes, which is that you say something and you therefore feel invisible after, even though you know that you are raising a salient point. So yeah, Karen, I found myself asking questions, not getting answers, and finally feeling compelled to focus those questions more directly on the economic development aspects of advancing solar in particular in Nevada, because like many states, now I've lived in 3 states that are single industry states. So I grew up in Michigan, the automobile industry, went to school in DC, it's government. I come to Nevada, it's hospitality and gaming and mining. And all of these geographies required some diversification in order to grow. And so the pushback was real. For those of you in the audience who've been doing this for a while, that we were considered a boutique. We were considered sort of a short-term industry. We were too expensive. Every sort of negative comment that you can imagine, we were faced with. But I had more of what I call a field of dreams approach, because I really and honestly felt, in a very naive way, that we were onto something and it required that advocacy. So yes, it's been a really interesting journey, and you still get the pushback, but now, as they say, the proof is in the pudding, and I'm feeling so much better about being willing to speak up.
From my native Iowa.
And we have the Iowa State Director here, State Energy Director. You all mentioned the importance of the American Association of Blacks in Energy, not only to your careers, but also to, as a source of lifelong friendships. Can you talk a little bit about the mission of ABE and its focus?
Sure. ABE was founded, interestingly, during the first energy crisis under President Carter, when a number of energy lawyers, advocates for their companies, noticed that there wasn't any group in the room, the negotiation room, talking about the energy interests of communities of color, and particularly Black communities. So several people got together to found ABE to make sure that energy policy takes into account the needs of people of color and energy-dependent communities. It's the American Association of Blacks in Energy, but it welcomes people from every walk of life who care about what the community's interests in energy are. And interestingly, because it's an overarching organization, one of its advantages, certainly for my career, is that it has given me a lens into other parts of the energy industry than I worked. So when I first joined ABE, I was working for Southern California Gas Company. So that was a local natural gas distribution company. Some of the founders were from Chevron. One was from Westinghouse. Others from electric utilities. And so at every meeting, we were getting those perspectives. And so coming back to our companies, being able to talk about how our operations or how our strategy fit into a larger energy picture made us more valuable than maybe some of our colleagues who were very focused only on our portion of the industry. And that has certainly helped me throughout. The other thing is that ABE became, in many ways, a family. My first conference, the senior African-American executive at SoCalGas was an ABE founder. And he literally took me by the elbow around to his colleagues and introduced me, told them, this is our newest Black woman. She's our top ranking Black executive at the company. Answer her questions. And they did, which one floored me because all of these people who were in these highfalutin positions, I was not expecting that to happen. But secondly, it flavored my experience in the organization. And I thought, if those men are going to do this for me, then I need to do it for whoever else is coming behind me. And that's the way the organization works. You can walk up to anybody in the organization, no matter what their title is, ask them a question and get it answered in more detail than you never wanted, but it does create a network where you can go to get your questions answered, and it's a safe space for asking those questions.
Yeah, I want to come back to the mentorship, but Rose, I want to see what you were the chair of the board for a while. So
actually, the interesting thing was of the five of us, four of us were board chairs, and the other one was the longtime secretary of the organization. Sorry.
Yeah. So we did. Yeah, exactly, Carolyn. We had leadership opportunities. Look, I talk in my chapter about feeling very isolated. A unique situation for me. One being an African American woman in energy policy in Nevada. And so I really was not aware of ABE. I became aware of ABE at a time where we were working to establish relationships early on in the Obama administration through the transition. And a delegation of ABE came for a meeting. I recall the tension there because I didn't know them and they didn't know me and they didn't know why I was even there. But over time, as I recognized the important work that ABE does across the country by both identifying and elevating Black leadership in the industry, in the energy industry, I realized that maybe I should find a way to be more connected because I felt so disconnected just by geography from constituencies where I could establish a comfort level. So ABE, to Carolyn's point, really became a family. It took them a minute, I think, to warm up to me because I did feel very much like an outsider. But we found those common threads. And I think the other point that Carolyn makes is I was able to interact with professionals from all aspects of the industry. I was also able to interact with professionals who found that the work that I was undertaking was a bit suspect. they were not exactly prepared to embrace what I was putting out, because I think they acknowledged that part of my advocacy meant that I was challenging the status quo. And they had to acknowledge that in some instances they represented the status quo. So it was an interesting sort of initiation. But at the end of the day, I think what we found was this camaraderie. And I have been so delighted with the opportunity to meet people from all over the country. And the common goal that we have is the commitment to the mission of AID.
A source of network and support for you during your career, and a source of discussion and bouncing ideas off of you. But I also think of it potentially as a pool of talent that our GridWise members could tap into when they're looking to fill the workforce. So can you talk a little bit about how ABE is set up in a way that GridWise members could interact and talk about their workforce needs?
First off, ABE is a membership organization, and it has chapters all over the country. Unfortunately, there isn't a chapter in Iowa, but we've got to figure out some way to remedy that. But there are chapters in Missouri, Illinois, several chapters in New York, up the eastern seacoast, in the South, the Midwest, the West Coast. So you can't be anywhere in the industry without being more than a couple hundred miles from an ABE chapter. And those chapters are where people really get a lot of their experience giving technical papers, running meetings, you name it. One of the interesting things is when non-Black executives go to an ABE conference, they figure out, they think, well, I'll go, I'll meet a few people, I'll press a little flesh and call it a day. But then they sit in those sessions and their head explodes, because the kinds of topics that are discussed in those meetings are all of the salient topics that people think of at an energy conference, and they're the senior executives of the industry talking about them. So it's not just an organization for networking. It really is an organization for learning more about the business of energy and the science of energy and the economics of energy. So I certainly encourage people to get familiar with the organization, because you will find people who have the kinds of skills that you're looking for.
And a network
Anything, Rose?
that can actually connect you to workforce opportunities, almost in a pre-vetted way, and or help to design or craft a response to some very specific needs. And we have sister relationships with the Black engineers. We have sister relationships with other organizations that have relationships with historically Black colleges and universities. So there is it allows you to connect almost directly to the resource. And I think we pride ourselves in being able to help in that regard.
Unless you think we're interested only in Black employees, there is a sister organization, Professional Hispanics in Energy, that we work together very closely. There is an Asian Pacific Islanders Association of energy professionals, and so there are affinity groups that can help you find the kinds of talent that you're looking for. It's out there if you cast a broad enough net.
Yeah, you both mentioned the mentorship that you have experienced through ABE, and in reading your chapters, you both talk a lot about being mentored and also being a mentor. And Rose, I would count you as, I am the beneficiary of your mentorship, so thank you. But I'm wondering, you devoted a lot of personal energy in the workplace and outside the workplace to being a mentor. And I'm wondering how much explicit support for your mentoring did you receive in the places that you worked?
You want to start?
I mean, I think that's a really interesting question. There's a sense that there's a formality associated with mentoring. That's not always the case. And thank you very much for the compliment, because I do consider you a treasured colleague, Karen. I think sometimes it is in sharing experiences, in sharing connections, if you will, that you find these common threads that allow you to collectively advance your goals and objectives. I have always felt a little uncomfortable with the notion of being a mentor. I feel more comfortable being a colleague and as someone who can brainstorm or share my experience, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Um, there are certainly more formal opportunities to do that, and I tend to shy away from it because the commitment can be pretty strenuous. But I just think having someone that may have walked a mile longer in the shoes that you're currently in to talk to someone who can embrace you for both your fears as well as your need for advancement, and provide guidance. I mean, I think that's the value of the mentor mentee relationship. But I think the most important thing is to be willing to put yourself out there to both gain from and contribute to that relationship.
Absolutely agree. And I guess a couple of points. One, some of my most treasured mentors were white men. A mentor doesn't have to look like me. A mentor doesn't have to necessarily be in the same company or even the same industry. It's someone who can help you navigate your path, and sometimes that's outside the organization. Having said that, we all talk about mentorship and kind of pat ourselves on the back for our mentorship programs. But what's really going to move the needle in terms of women and people of color in the workplace is sponsorship. And the difference between a mentor is that the mentor will give you the rules of the game and share their experience. A sponsor is the person who puts their professional capital on the line for you when you're not in the room. You may not even know who that sponsor is, but we all have the ability to be a sponsor for someone else as we're talking about succession planning or whatever it is. So thinking about who is there out there within my organization or someone I've seen that could benefit from my raising their profile in my meetings or my conversations with my colleagues is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and you actually both talk about getting phone calls out of the blue from people who end up being your sponsors, who are pulling you forward because they're recognizing your strengths. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to say anything about those out of the blue phone calls.
I don't know. I mean, the best one for me was, the end result was a lost election. But when I ran for lieutenant governor for the state of Nevada, in a taxi cab, I think, in D.C., I got a call from the governor and both of our U.S. senators actually recruiting me to run. Who knew that they had any interest in the work that I was doing? I mean, you have interactions, certainly attending meetings. You know that there are some common political interests, But that was pretty shocking to me. And that's also consistent with the call that I got from the governor's chief of staff to come in to talk about the utility commission. So I like to point out that you never know who's watching. You never know who is willing to sponsor. And for those who are in the audience and are considering uh, advancing those who are in their sphere of activity, who they know have the talent and they know they have the capacity and the skills to move forward, I really encourage you to be one of those people who makes that phone call to lift someone up, to give them an opportunity, particularly in our space, because right now there is a significant need to ensure that we have the broadest possible participation in the energy space and the clean energy space in particular to ensure our success. So that's a postcard from the future.
I guess I've had some, interestingly, I have never applied for a job I've gotten. Of course, I've never gotten a job I applied for either. But every time I have made a career move, it has been because someone said, Carolyn, I think you really should consider this job. And they obviously had greased the skids beforehand. So it really does make a difference. The other thing I wanted to say, though, is that we are a risk-averse industry because we have to ensure reliability, safety, affordability, et cetera. But we are even more risk-averse when it comes to forwarding people who don't look like us or who don't have exactly the background we have. It sounds horrible, but I've always said, I will know that we don't have to do any more in diversity when I can be as mediocre as the white male next to me who keeps getting promoted, and I get promoted the same at the same rate. We need, as people of color, as women, et cetera, we need an opportunity to fail and learn from our mistakes. But what often happens is that when we succeed, that success is ours. When we fail, the failure is our entire community. And we've got to change that. We've got to allow people to get a few scars because that's the only way you grow. You grow through your mistakes, not through your successes.
I'm watching the clock, and it's gone from 45 minutes to 30 minutes to 15 minutes with no increments in between, like even minutes or seconds. So, Richie, tell me how much time we have, because I do have a prize for questions, and I want to get to them. So, but I have pages for these women.
5 minutes, but let's get to some audience questions.
Let's get some questions from the audience then. Here, over here.
There's one.
And you get the hardcover version, and hopefully Carolyn will sign it for you afterwards.
So hi, I'm Mona Sheth. I work with Schneider Electric, and I just want to say that some of the things that you have articulated, I haven't ever heard in a conference room in energy. So thank you, Karen.
No, thank you. You wrote the book.
Yeah, and I've been in DC 13 years, and this is the first time we've had open conversations around this. Much of what you've said really resonated with me. I knew 4 women of color when I entered energy, federal government relations, and now in our company, we have some amazing, talented women that our VP, Jeannie Salo, and I have brought into the team, and we're cultivating. But one of my questions to you is, how do we encourage those women to take those risks and ask questions and volunteer for things and stretch themselves? Because I have noticed a difference in the way men and women are in the workplace, and that women, we try to play it safe. We're scared of showing our imperfections and speaking up. So what are the types of things you've done with women you have mentored that have helped them take those risks? Because they're so talented, but they need that safe space.
One of the things I've done with people is when I know there's an important meeting come up, I will talk with them beforehand and coach them on questions they might raise or issues they might address so that they've got more confidence going into the room. Secondly, encouraging them not to allow themselves to be overlooked.
I think one of you had a great anecdote where they told you, "I'm not finished yet." Was that?
Oh, that was
Yes.
Joyce, I think.
That's Joyce.
Someone talked over her and she said, "Excuse me, I'm
But
not
someone
finished."
told her that the next time that happens, here's what you say.
do?
Excuse me, I'm not finished yet. So
And to raise your hand to create an actual physical, I am here and I'm not finished. And well, thank you very much for the question, but thank you more importantly for using your position to elevate opportunities for other women and people of color, because sometimes it takes that. My favorite musical is Hamilton. And so I love this notion about being in the room where it happens, even though I'm sorry I can't be there today, but I am in the room virtually. The notion of coaching and preparation and allowing people to trust their gut. If you know that you are going to be treated fairly, then you're willing to speak up. And for those who are like you and have been in the organization for a while, identify those folks who maybe you need to have a conversation with so that they will provide the space for some of these new and talented individuals to be given the opportunity to display that talent. Sometimes people are so anxious to do their job, they don't even recognize that they are creating these invisible barriers. So to the extent that you see them, and there are relationships where you can make them aware, and always encourage folks to trust their gut.
questions, other questions. There's one over here, all the way. Oh, one here. And then one in the corner. And then you tell me when we're done with questions.
Scott Packard, Cubitech. Cubitech has partnered with EPB in Chattanooga, the University of Alabama, Huntsville, University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and North Carolina State, which is a historically black college, to do some STEM workforce development in a grant proposal with the Economic Development Agency. One of the key elements is to get at underserved communities, women, people of color, and to draw more people into the beginning of the pipeline, K through 12, community colleges, and the thing is, what are the obstacles? How do we get past some of those obstacles in order to draw a more diverse population at the beginning of the pipeline, so that there are more people showing up at university, pursuing STEM degrees, pursuing opportunities in not just energy, but other. And I will be looking at Abe as a source of mentors for this program if we win the grant proposal. So I do appreciate that resource.
It really does start in elementary and middle school, particularly with young girls. If you don't start reaching them in middle school, they start becoming socialized to think that they should not be smart. They should not act smart. So making sure all of you men who are fathers to amazing little girls, keep telling them that. And when you start hearing them start to downplay themselves, make sure that you support them. I had a father who told me I could do anything. He was a pretty traditional person, but he loved his daughter. He wanted to see his daughter succeed. So make sure that you're doing the same thing, one. And two, look for those kinds of programs for especially young girls that will, Black Girls Code or whatever, to keep them interested in science and math and other areas.
Rose.
Look, I love what you've described as your program in terms of leveraging the institutions within your community. And I think the barriers that you describe have more to do with outreach and connecting and getting the information to the right folks. So you already have a partnership in place. I would encourage you to expand that partnership and maybe identify a handful of schools within your jurisdiction who will allow some of the students, the college students that are already engaged in STEM, to come and make presentations to some of the younger students. So creating that connective tissue within the community, allowing young people to see slightly older younger people who are already advancing careers academically in STEM to connect with the younger folks. I think there is a tremendous value, because when you can see someone who looks like you making a difference, it is a remarkable opportunity for advancement.
Black Energy Awareness Month, BEAM, and every single chapter has to do a BEAM activity, and they do a lot of things with high schools, middle schools, oftentimes elementary schools. I know there's a chapter in Chattanooga. There's one in the Raleigh-Durham area. They could help you out there.
And then, Richie, I think we have one more question.
No more? It was answered. I think we got to it, so it may be just a wrap.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking these fabulous women, and buy their book. Buy their book. And there's the information on how you can, where you can take a look at the book. So, thank you very much for joining us for the last day and a half. We're not over yet. There's still lunch out there for you, and some of you may be staying around to meet with the Department of Energy later this afternoon. I do want to thank all of our speakers, some of whom traveled a long way to be here, and it was so good to see all of you in person. Well, firstly, to meet all of you in person. Thanks to our sponsors again, and I do want to do a special call out to the GridWise staff. I did say yesterday that the GridWise is young, and what I did not mean was GridWise, the organization, is young. What I meant is that a lot of the staff with us, not necessarily are young in age, but are fairly new here. With the exception of Richie, all of us started less than 2 years ago, and 3 of us started less than 16 months ago. So let me just call them out. We had Shalia George, Josh Steinhardt, Aurora Eadington, Malika Walton, and last but not least, Richie O'Neill. This never would have happened without all of you, so thank you very much. And Richie, any last instructions before we?
No, you said it. Lunch is served.
Lunch is served, so thank you again. We'll see you, hopefully we don't have to wait a year to see you, so thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
That was fun.